What's happening? Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon. As always, it is very much appreciated. Before we get started, don't forget to click that like button. Hit that thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy the content that we have for you. We'll get to padded practices a little bit later on. We've got some news today, obviously. Davon Godchaux and Matthew Judon, once again, part of headlines. Before we get to that, though, let me jump to my man, Charlie, who sends a $10 super chat to begin this program. Thank you, Charlie. It is appreciated. Looks like this rebuild is going to be messy. Feeling a little less optimistic after the last few days of news. Looking forward to your camp insights from the past 2 days. It's really early, right? It's really early in this process, Charlie. On the field, we have to keep reminding ourselves that nothing is built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. This is a rebuild. We have an entirely new offense with the scheme and a ton of new players on that side of the football. You have a young rookie quarterback, still very impressionable as he's trying to get ready and develop into a QB1. So there's a lot of things that have to continue to progress and develop throughout this camp. It's very early. As far as the stuff happening off the field with Matthew Judon, I'm going to get into that in a little while. The Godchaux news is good news as far as not causing any kind of hysteria or distraction, right? So I think it's really early. We have to continue to remind ourselves of that, and we'll see what this thing looks like as we get closer to that joint practice against Philadelphia on Tuesday, August 13th. We'll see where this team is headed. I do think there have been some positives at camp the last couple of days. I'm not sure a lot of those positives have been talked about. I think a lot of people have been focusing, and rightly so, Drake May. I've said it before that his development this year is the most critical part of this entire football team and this entire rebuild. It is about Drake May working out, becoming that future of the franchise. So I get why people are talking about him. He should be talked about. Jacoby Brissett should be talked about. The things that aren't working should absolutely be talked about. But I feel like some of the things that have actually looked pretty good have not been talked about as much. So we'll get into some of that. We'll get into some of the bad as well. We'll get into the Godchaux, Judon stuff. But thank you, Charlie, for the $10 super chat. Eddie, thank you for the $1 super sticker, I guess you could call it. I appreciate you, and always appreciate those who join us on this program. And if you're watching live, if you love what we do, throw a comment in there. If I see it, I will try to get to it. If you want to jump to the front of the line with your thought, your question, you can do that by sending a super chat as well as helping us financially here with the program. All right, let's get started with Devon Godchaux. Adam Schefter reports that it's a 2-year, $21 million contract extension for Godchaux. It is worth up to $21 million. So we always talk about the worth up game, and it's worth up to $21 million. Now, the guarantees, according to Schefter, are $16.5 million in guaranteed money. Let me start here. I'm not surprised. If you've been watching this podcast, if you watched the podcast on Monday, we talked about what was happening on the field. We'll get to Judon a little later. We discussed the Judon situation, talking to Mayo, walking away from Mayo, being sent off the field seemingly, then coming back to speak with Groh and Wolf, and then walking out. And then we talked about Godchaux. In Godchaux's conversations, and Drew Rosenhaus, who represents Godchaux. Rosenhaus was in the building on Monday, and he spoke with a bunch of different people. He spoke with Robin Glazier at the family and friends tent for a little bit. He then spoke with Matt Groh after practice. Matt Groh walked away. Godchaux came up to Rosenhaus. He and Rosenhaus had a long conversation. Then Gerard Mayo came up to those two guys. And as I said on Monday, I try not to be a body language expert, okay? Because I think it's a dangerous thing to try to read into all the body language. But I said this on Monday after watching all of this play out earlier in the morning, because it was right in front of me. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I would have said I thought it was more likely that Judon would be a part of the 2024 Patriots than it would be Godchaux. After watching on Monday, and I said this on Monday, after watching what happened during that padded practice and after that padded practice, I said to all of you, I felt like it was a 180. all of a sudden I felt more confident in Godchaux being a part of this team in 2024 than Judon, because the body language during the conversations between Rosenhaus and Groh, Rosenhaus, Mayo, and Godchaux, the body language seemed to be pretty positive. Mayo and Godchaux were joking around. Godchaux pushed Mayo at one point. They were laughing with each other. Rosenhaus seemed like he was in a good mood. It just felt like good vibes watching those guys talk. That was not the vibe when Judon was talking to Groh and Wolf. And as we saw on film, not necessarily the vibe when he was speaking with Mayo. So I'm not surprised by this whatsoever. Not surprised whatsoever after watching those conversations happen on Monday with Godchaux. Seemed positive, seemed amicable, and obviously it was. So now the deal is done. Here's one important part with the money, because I know a lot of people will look at this and they'll say 21 million, 16.5 million guaranteed. What in the hell is going on? How could you possibly sign Davon Godchaux to a contract extension and not get this Judon contract done? It's all in the details. What I think is happening here, the fact that Godchaux gets $16.5 million guaranteed, what I think is going on is half of that guaranteed money roughly is from 2024. I think the Patriots guaranteed Godchaux's contract this year. He was on the books for like $7 million. He had another $1 million he could earn. I would not be surprised if we found out that the Patriots made that $8 million or so all guaranteed for Godchaux. Said, you know what? We're going to guarantee you your money this year. You're getting that guaranteed money. And then I believe they likely tacked on, if not 1 year, 2 years to the deal. Now, here's the thing. The second year to the extension could end up being a dummy year. And what that means is you could look at it and say there's no guaranteed money. It's a voidable year. All this funny stuff that NFL GMs can do with contracts. I would not be surprised if there is a second year tacked on. So it goes through 2026, but that year in 2026 is a dummy year. And what really happened here was that Godchaux got all of his money this season guaranteed. And then on top of that, in 2025, he got another $8 to $8.5 million in guarantees. I think that's what happened here. And if you look at the $16.5 million guaranteed, according to Andrew Callahan, that places Godchaux outside the top 30 when we talk about interior defensive linemen. So he's not even getting paid as a top 30 interior defensive lineman when you look at guaranteed money at that position. And that matters. So it's not an overpay. It makes sense. Godchaux wants to be here. Patriots want him to be here. Guarantee his money in 2024. Give him another year at about roughly the same money, guaranteed, and then probably have that third year be that dummy year for accounting purposes. So that's what I think is happening here. Now, why do you do this? Again, not only because Godchaux wants to be here, not only because the Patriots want him here, but we talked and discussed this on Monday, right? We discussed that the interior defensive line is pretty thin for the Patriots. When you look at their depth chart, you've got a Quale. He's not really an every down guy, right? And you've got some other names there that might not knock you over. They can help, but they're not really big names. They're not frontline kind of guys. You let Lawrence Guy, you let him go. So when you're looking at the interior of that defensive line, especially with the Christian Barmore health situation. Now, I don't think, because Barmore got sick, he got blood clots, all of a sudden the Patriots pivoted and signed Godchaux. I don't think that's what happened. But did Barmore's absence make bringing Godchaux into the family, so to speak, and make him happy? Did it make more sense after what happened with Barmore? Yes, it did, because that interior defensive line is thin. And if you're not going to have Barmore, it's even thinner. You're kicking Keon White to the edge, so he's not going to play much inside as it looks. Wise is not really going to play a ton inside. So when you look at the numbers game, yes, you need Godchaux. Different player than Barmore. Barmore's more impact, more behind the line of scrimmage. He pressures the quarterback, all of that stuff. But from a numbers standpoint, in what you were looking at on this defensive line, to have Godchaux out there on first and second down, he stays healthy, that is a crucial part of your defense, especially when we talk about Barmore and what's going on. And then on top of that, you've got the Judon deal, which we will get into. How does that all end up unfolding? Does Judon end up not being a part of this football team? And if that's the case, if you don't have Barmore, you don't have Judon, what's that D-line look like? I mean, you need a veteran presence in the middle that can kind of settle things down. So Godchaux helps that depth at defensive line. He is the early down guy. You know what you're getting. Godchaux also played ball, right? He played ball. He was out there. He was dressed. He was practicing. He participated. He took one day off. Mayo said that was because he had a little bit of tightness, and it seems like he did have a little bit of tightness, and that's why he was not out there that one day, because he was right back out there practicing with the team. So he played ball. He didn't play, a game of I'm going to tell you one thing and do another. He's out there. He's participating. He said he wants to stay. Patriots, Godchaux's team were able to work out a deal. They met in the middle. Godchaux's happy. They're happy. And that's what can happen when you play ball. When you draw the hard line, sometimes it's much more difficult to get a deal done. The other difference between Godchaux and Matthew Judon is age. Judon's going to be 32 years old in a couple of weeks. Godchaux's 29. And what we've seen from Elliott Wolf is he's willing to pay money to guys that have not hit 30 yet, right? We've seen it over and over and over again, especially with this defense. They paid Duggar, 28 years old. They just paid Peppers, 28 years old. They paid Jelani Tavai. He's 27. Part of the problem with Judon is that he's going to be 32 in a couple weeks, and he's coming off of that injury. So they look at Godchaux and they say to themselves, tying us together for the next couple of years isn't a bad thing, because he's 29, and by the end of this deal, he'll be 31, and we feel like we can live with that. Don't forget what Jerod Mayo said either yesterday morning when he met with the media. Mayo told the media, he told all of us, this is a team that's going to lean on its defense. It's going to lean on its defense, and it's going to lean on running the football. They want to be a clock-controlled kind of offense. Alex Van Pelt has talked about running the football, establishing the run, running early on. So when you look at the style of play, locking up these defensive players that were good last year, should continue to be good this year and the year after, hopefully the year after that, it's a sound business decision because of what this team is going to be. And honestly, when I look at this contract that Godchaux said yes to, if we are talking about just guaranteeing the money in 2024, tacking on an extra year with roughly the same guarantees and maybe a dummy year, that's the kind of contract that I was looking at for Matthew Judon. I feel like it's a similar deal, right? Now, Judon, of course, his money is going to be much higher than, $8 million guaranteed this year, if that's how the deal was put together by the Patriots. That's me speculating. That's what makes sense to me. Judon's money is going to be at a higher level, but the idea, the framework, guarantee the money to Judon, guarantee it with a bump, give him a raise in 2024, guarantee that money. So try to bump him up to say 14, 15 million, guarantee the 14, 15 million, tack on a year in 2025 at reasonable money, and then maybe have that extra dummy year. That framework makes sense to me when we talk about Judon, but I don't think that Judon believes that that type of deal makes sense to his side. We'll get to Matthew Judon in a minute and what happened today. But first, don't forget, give us that thumbs up. Every like counts, right? If you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up. More eyeballs to the product is what happens when you click that thumbs up. So click that thumbs up. Facebook, you can also like this content as you watch it. Twitter, you can also throw us a like on Twitter as well. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to hit 3,500 subscribers. It's a slow march getting there. We're at about 3,300 and change. Every single one of you count. So don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching, I appreciate you. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Pods, rate and review, and make sure you come on over to YouTube to give us that thumbs up as well. All right, I'll get to my padded practices thoughts soon, especially on Drake May. But let me first talk about Matthew Judon and what happened today. So Phil Perry, he comes out yesterday. My friend Phil reports that Judon was not at the facility yesterday. So not only was he not on the practice field, he was not even at the facility. He wasn't in the building. He was nowhere to be near that place yesterday. So that's a problem, right? Guys don't practice, guys holding out, whatever. Sometimes they still come into the facility, they get treatment, they kind of hang out, do what they got to do in the building, and then they go home. Judon never showed up to the facility. He was nowhere to be found yesterday. So that's number one. Then we found out all these different words and terminologies being used as far as Judon and how far apart the Patriots are with him talking contract. We heard that they're very far apart. They are far, far apart. One report said it was a sizable gap between where Judon is and where the Patriots are. Of course, you can go to Henry McKenna going back a couple of weeks ago. He said that the sides were not close. So it's obvious the sides are not close. Before I continue, let me jump to a super chat here from our friend Nelson Lloyd. $20 super chat. Thank you, Nelson. Do you think Judon screwed himself with his attitude this week? And with you being at practice, do they look like a dark horse team this season? I would say they do not look like a dark horse team this season right now. Again, I'll get to the good, I'll get to the bad of practice a little bit later after we get through Judon. But overall, big picture, I would say they do not look like a dark horse right now. Of course, they've only had 6 practices, 2 padded practices. We're very early in this process. We'll have a better feel when we get to August 13th. You have that joint practice against Philadelphia. We'll see how the top units look on each side of the football. But right now, I would say, the offense has been up and down, more down than up, and the defense has looked pretty good. But of course, you have to remember the defense now is without Christian Barmore. Jabril Peppers got hurt on Monday. We don't know what's going on with him, how long he might be out, what's going to happen with Matt Judon. So there's a lot of unanswered questions about the defense and who will be out there now. So I would not say they look like a dark horse. But again, there were some good things that I saw this week. So I would stay tuned for some of the good things. And Nelson, thank you for the $20 super chat. It is very much appreciated. So Judon, Patriots far apart. I understand Matthew Judon's frustration. He is absolutely 100% unequivocally underpaid. He's on the books for like $6.5, $7 million. He can earn another $1 million. And when you look at pass rushers, you look at the top 20, we're talking about guys who are making between like 15 and 20, $25 million average annual value. There's no doubt, even with the injury last year, if Judon walked into free agency a few months ago, if that was the situation, he would have been making a hell of a lot more money than he's set to make right now, even after the surgery, even with the fact that he's going to be 32 in a couple of weeks. He still would have gotten much more money than he's going to get this year. So he is underpaid. And it has to be frustrating. He's human. He's looking around. And a lot of other guys are getting contract extensions, right? And he's saying to himself, I have produced. I've been a big-time impact player. I have helped lead this football team on the field, off the field. I have said mostly all the right things. I have handled myself professionally. This is before Monday. I have handled myself professionally. And, I'm one of those guys that feels like I'm the fabric. I'm one of the fabrics of this team. I'm part of that, right? I'm one of those dudes. And he's looking around, and Peppers is getting extended, and Tavai is getting extended, and Duggar gets his money, and now Godchaux gets his money. I don't think it's a coincidence that what happened on Monday when Drew Rosenhaus was in town. And it certainly looked like, to me and many others, that a deal was going to get done with Godchaux, and it gets done today. I don't think it's a coincidence that Judon did what he did on Monday, the same day that Rosenhaus is there to talk business and get that Godchaux deal done. So I understand the frustration, but you cannot do what Judon did on Monday. You just can't do it. It is unprofessional. It is ridiculous. And if you want to go behind closed doors and you want to give Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh a piece of your mind, all means do it. If you have an issue with Mayo and you want to get something off your chest, do it behind closed doors. To do it out there on the field in front of everybody, it's just not professional. And it falls very, very short of what Judon said he was going to do when he spoke to the Rich Schertenlieb show going back a few weeks ago. A complete 180 from what Judon said he was going to do and how he was going to handle this. And then we have today. Today was interesting. So Diana Russini of The Athletic, she posted today that Judon was absent, as we knew, from practice yesterday because he seeks a revised contract. Russini posted since then, the Patriots, so since Monday, the Patriots have made an offer, per source. This could help move things in the right direction. Well, Judon, quickly thereafter, or whoever runs Judon's Twitter, because Judon tried to tell the media that he doesn't run his own Twitter. I'll get to that in a second. So Judon or whoever runs Judon's Twitter quickly responds to this report, and that person posts, no, they haven't, talking about the Patriots. No, they haven't, but it makes me look bad again. Don't believe the lies. There's a lot to be taken out of that. Number one, he's saying, no, the Patriots have not offered me a new contract, a revised contract. Number two, he thinks this makes him look bad. I don't think it necessarily makes him look bad. I think it's the team trying to say, hey, look, we're trying to work with him. We want him here. We're trying to work out a deal. There was no cross words about Judon within the post from Russini. If Russini posted that the Patriots had offered, this revised contract and they threw an offer on the table and Judon disrespectfully turned it down, or Judon's not interested in doing business, or some kind of quote that is bashing Judon, then I think Judon has a better case to be made that the reports are trying to make him look bad. I think this is just the team side trying to paint their picture and say, we're trying to play ball with him. We're trying to work with him. Judon is now taking all of this personally. It would seem to me that he's taking all of this personally. Now, he also said, makes me look bad again. Pretty tough to sell me on this idea that you don't run your Twitter when the tweet says makes me look bad. What person are you speaking in when you tweet that? Right? So I'm not buying the whole I don't run my own Twitter stuff. Russini then clarified her report. She tweets out, Judon was offered a few revised contracts from New England before training camp. They have yet to agree on a reworked deal. So I know some people say, oh man, Russini, she lied. She was lying. What a liar. Bad reporting, et cetera, et cetera. What is more likely the case is that whoever texted Russini, she did not have the specifics. She took the text or the phone call or whatever. I'm guessing it was a text. She took the text as we offered him something and we're waiting to hear back. I don't know if she had a timeline or not. This could easily be just a little bit of a miscommunication between Russini and her source. That doesn't really matter, though. What matters is Russini came back and clarified. So Judon is right. Judon is tweeting the truth. There has been no offer since what happened on Monday. The offers that were put on the table for Judon were before training camp. So there hasn't been much movement as of late. That's the truth of this, okay? So we'll put that to bed. Here's my thought on Judon. Just trade him. Trade him. It's time to trade Judon. This is becoming a distraction. Unless you think that you can quickly get business done and this issue can be resolved within the next 24 to 48 hours, just look at this and say enough is enough. I want Judon here, right? I want Judon to be a Patriot in 2024. But if this is going to be what's happening, this is getting ugly. It's getting ugly. Judon's calling the team liars. Don't believe the lies. And I do think this time he was talking about the Patriots. I just think on Monday, he undermines his coach, right? He undermines Mayo by handling it the way he handled it. It's disrespectful to the first-time head coach, the first-year head coach. So you undermined Mayo. You walk off the field, then you come back. You further undermine the head coach by walking back onto the field and then going to Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh, because now you're setting the structure, right? You're setting the hierarchy. You're kind of thumbing your nose to Mayo. Yeah, I know that you told me to get lost. I know you don't want me on the field, but you know what? I'm coming back onto the field, and I'm going to talk to Groh and Wolf. So you undermine the head coach. Then you show up the front office. Because during that conversation with Wolf and Groh, Judon did 95% of the talking. And it was very animated. Everybody in the media could see what was happening. And there's a point to that, right? There's a point to why Judon is being so animated. He's the center of the show at that point. So you undermined the head coach. You walk back onto the field, further undermining Mayo. Then you start to pretty much show up Groh and Wolf by the histrionics in what you're doing out there in the middle of the field during training camp, which is not the time to do it. Again, if you want to bitch to Groh and Wolf, I've got no issue with it. If you even want to bitch to Jerod Mayo, I don't have much of a problem with that. But this is training camp. You're in the middle of a practice. Business is trying to get done. And at that point, you're being selfish if you're Judon. You are being 100% selfish at that point. When the team is out there, what you're doing is you're kicking all of the other dudes that are on the field that are working right now, you're kicking them directly into the groin. Because at that point, now it's about you, right? It's not about the guys who are practicing. It's not about the work that's being done. It's about you. You want Mayo to pay attention to you. You want to have a sidebar for 5 to 10 minutes with Wolf and Groh while they're trying to evaluate the team. So now you're getting in everybody else's way. It's unprofessional and it's ridiculous. And you're showing up the entire franchise. Between your conversation with Mayo, walking off the field and coming back on, and then your tantrum that you threw towards Wolf and Groh, this is all about Matthew. It's the Matthew Judon show. And I like Judon. And I'll say it again. If this was away from the practice field, if it wasn't in front of me and a bunch of others, dozens of others, if this wasn't happening right out there on Front Street, I would not have much of an issue with it. But the fact that you're being out there and you're doing this and your arms are up in the air, your palms are up extended towards the sky, you walk off and then you turn around and you scream something towards Wolf and Groh. Who knows what that was, but I don't think any of us think it was a positive. Everybody's watching this. You are creating a soap opera as the Judon turns. And I don't need as the Judon turns. I'm there to watch the Patriots. I'm there to watch practice. I want to see how this team is progressing. And what you're doing is you're becoming this huge obstacle onto the field, and you're making it about you. And that's where he screwed up. He didn't screw up having a beef with Mayo or Wolf or Groh. He can have a disagreement with them. Negotiations get tough. I understand him being frustrated and not happy. But where he screwed up was that he made it totally about him, and he made this a big, like, almost publicity stunt when he didn't have to. Dude in the building. Those guys are around in that facility all the time. Judon has more than enough opportunity to sit down with Mayo, to sit down with Wolf, to sit down with Groh, and give them the business if he wants to. It is inexcusable what he did out there. Public display on Monday. Inexcusable. And so now the reason why I think about, moving him, even though I would love to kind of keep him on the team, because I think he is good for the team when he is focused on the right things. I think he's good for the team on the field. I think he's good for the team off the field. But now you've got some questions, right? Can you trust him? If you're Mayo, could you trust him after what happened on Monday? Do you trust Matthew Judon? He goes out there, he tells Rich Schertenlieb that he's not going to hold in, he's not going to hold out. What he did last year was quote unquote trash. And now, all of a sudden, he's flipping a complete 180 from what he said with Rich Schertenlieb, from what he said to the media the week before. Now, just a few days later, he's making it about himself. He's becoming a distraction. Can you trust him moving forward? If he comes back tomorrow, walks into the facility and says, I want to go out there and practice, do you trust the fact that he's going to go out there and be honorable in practice? Or do you have to get concerned that if something gets heated, he's going to, do something? He's going to then become the show again. So can you trust him? Here's another thing that I think is huge about this. You're setting the precedent for others. Matthew Judon is unhappy with his contract. He has all the right in the world to be upset about his contract. But the way he acted, he has no right to do that on Monday. If you bring him back, if you pay him and you bring him back, now what happens, right? Other guys that want contract extensions, are they going to think, oh, well, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that, right? I'll push my self. I'll push myself above the team. You set a dangerous precedent. If you allow Judon to do what he did on Monday and you pay him anyway and you play him like nothing ever happened, now that opens the door for other people on this team to do what Judon did on Monday. You have to draw the line at some point, right? You don't want to set that precedent. Don't forget, the Patriots, what have they said? From the very beginning of this Wolf Mayo era, they want to reset the culture. You don't need a malcontent. You don't need a distraction. You don't need somebody who has been a leader for this football team on and off the field. You don't need that guy to be a hair across the tuchus. You don't need it. You don't need it. All right, I'll get to my thoughts on the padded practices Monday and Tuesday. I went to both of the padded practices. I will give you the good, the bad from those practices in a couple of minutes. First, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, give us that thumbs up. If you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, you can like this as well. And you can always move over to YouTube to try to beat that algorithm, smack it in the face by giving us that thumbs up. Comments help as well. Subscribing helps an awful lot. So like, comment, subscribe. If you're a Spotify user, Apple Pods, and you listen to the show all the time, do not forget to rate and review. And by the way, you can also put a comment down now over there at Spotify. Before you could put the comment, all I could do was publish the comment. Now I could actually reply, which is fun. So don't forget to rate and review at Spotify and Apple Pods. Before we get to practice and what I've seen, how do I feel about Drake May and some of the other things? Got to bring up Terry Grant with a $50 super chat. Terry, you have now done this multiple times. You are spoiling me with these super chats. I appreciate it. I can't say enough. Just wanted to show my appreciation for the up-to-the-minute Patriots camp news. Much appreciated. This time is working well for practices. Thank you. I do appreciate it. My schedule has been all over the joint the last few weeks, working at 98.5, doing night shows. We did some morning shows last week, as you know, Terry, and I just felt like it wasn't working out, right? Practice was going on as I'm doing the podcast, and then I would do a podcast like 2 days later or whatever it was, and now I'm like a day and a half, 2 days behind the news cycle, so it just didn't make much sense. So during training camp, up until the 13th of August, that Tuesday, when the Patriots have the joint practice against the Eagles, we're going at 4 o'clock Eastern live, so I could either go to practice, watch things play out, take my notes. If I can't get to practice for some reason, I can at least pay attention to what's going on Twitter, get my thoughts together, and then do it. So I appreciate it. Can't say enough. I mean, the $50 super chat, I promise you, I will drink a few beers on this $50 from you. And again, I can't thank you enough, Terry. Means the world to me. Means the world. Every super chat means a lot to me. But when you throw the $50 super chat, oh boy, man, oh man, to spend $50 of your hard-earned money on this podcast, to watch me yap and go back and forth with you guys and gals, it just, I don't overlook that. I do not take that for granted. All right, let's get to some of my takeaways, big takeaways from padded practices. I know that a lot of people, here's the one thing that I will say before I get started. What I realize being at practice, it's pretty amazing. And I don't think anybody is doing anything maliciously. But what I see and what others see sometimes could be totally different when we're watching the same thing play out. Offensive line play. I'll talk about the offensive line at some point here. You hear some people say the offensive line is just bad. The offensive line wasn't very good yesterday. You hear other people say the offensive line is taking steps in the right direction. We're all watching the same practices. We're all watching the same one-on-one pass rush drills. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Some people will watch Drake May and they'll say, oh, he looks terrible because he's just not playing well, this, that, and the other. Some people will say he's not playing well because of factors outside of what he's really doing. So, we'll go back and forth, all of us who are at these practices, and we'll see certain things that others won't agree with. And it's just kind of interesting to see all of that play out in real time as I'm at practice. But I remind you, first and foremost, that 2 padded practices, it's really early. Really, really early, okay? 2 padded practices. Nothing that I say during this podcast is a declarative statement on what this team will be 2 months from now. It's 2 padded practices. There's a lot of new going on, okay? So that's the first thing I will say. We all have to understand and appreciate that it's a couple of padded practices. It doesn't mean we can't talk about it, and we will talk about it. I'll give you the good and the bad. But we always have to have that in the background as the context. Things can change. Things can get worse. Things can get better. So keep that in mind. These are my 30,000-foot observations from Monday and Tuesday. Let's start with Jacoby Brissett. Clearly, Jacoby is QB1 right now. Clearly. When you're watching the quarterbacks on the field, Brissett has been the more consistent. Brissett had the best practice out of the first 2 days on Monday out of all the quarterbacks. He outplayed May. He outplayed Zappe. He outplayed Milton. Right now, there's no doubt that Jacoby Brissett is QB1, and that should be expected. I am not surprised by that. I did not anticipate any of the other quarterbacks to leapfrog Brissett within the first week of padded practices. He is a veteran. He's got experience in this system. He understands the scheme. He gets it, right? So he is QB1. Overall, I think he's been good. The first 2 padded practices, I think he has had some flash throws, 3 or 4 throws where I go, wow, that's a great throw. A couple throws that really stand out. He's had a couple of those. But really why he's QB1 is he's just the most consistent, and he's been in the most command. You could just tell that he has command. Couple missteps. They had to run a lap yesterday because Jalen Polk, I don't know if he lined up in the wrong spot or he didn't sub at the right time. Something happened with Polk, so the whole offense had to run a lap. But Brissett has mostly been in command. Command in the huddle, command out there, what he's seeing, right? Changing plays, all that stuff. Brissett's QB1 right now. Let's get to Drake May. There has been a lot said about Drake May. I think some of the hyperbole is completely out of control with Drake May. I think if you hear some people talk about May over the past couple of days, it makes it sound as if this man is not capable of playing football. I would pump the brakes on that. Has May looked good the last 2 days? No. Monday and Tuesday, the first 2 padded practices, May has not looked good. Okay? Period. Hasn't looked good. So let's get that out of the way. I'll tell you why I think he hasn't looked good. Number one, I do think he's a little bit sped up. I think a lot is happening. It's the first 2 padded practices of his NFL career. So a lot is going on. He's trying to keep track of everything. He's trying to stay ahead of everything. And this happens to a lot of young players early in the camp process. They get sped up. They're thinking too much. They press a little bit. I think some of that is what's going on with May. He does have inaccuracy at times. Some of the inaccuracy, I think, is almost planned inaccuracy. There have been a couple of throws that have been back shoulder or low. I think some of those throws, at least 2 or 3 of those throws, were on purpose. The back shoulder throws specifically. But he has been inaccurate at times. He's thrown high, he throws low, he's thrown behind a couple of guys. All of this is stuff that we talked about before May got drafted, right? This is the kind of stuff that you would see when he played at North Carolina. He would have bouts of inaccuracy. Easy throws, he would miss at times. We talked about this. We talked a lot about this on the podcast before the draft. Leading into the draft, we broke down Drake May, the good and the bad, right? And we warned you that there are times that he misfires. There are times that he misses open receivers. There are times that he'll chuck a ball into the first row. And you see some of it. We have to understand that he's learning, right? He's learning the offense. He's learning the scheme. He's learning the terminology. He has a lot to figure out. So he has not looked good the first 2 days of padded practices. However, I will also say that he has not been helped. Yesterday is a perfect example of this. I want you to think, if you're Drake May, right? I want you to put yourself in Drake May's cleats right now. Your first padded practice in the NFL doesn't go well. It was your toughest practice as an NFL player. Monday was a struggle. It was a struggle. And you know everybody's talking about it. You know everybody's tweeting about it. You know that people are, some people are getting concerned already. So you go into Tuesday's practice and you want to have a great practice because you know that yesterday's practice wasn't good. So you go out there and you are playing with a center who cannot snap the football. I repeat, you are playing behind a center that cannot snap shotgun. Antonio Mafi is a train wreck, and it's not his fault. He was a defensive lineman just a few years ago. He is a project. He was a project at guard, let alone at center. I'm telling you, Mafi cannot snap the football in a shotgun formation. He can't do it. He cannot do it consistently. It is brutal to watch. Train wreck. He's out there because David Andrews missed the last couple of days of practice, excused absence. So without Andrews, Nick Leverett has to go up to the backup center spot. Now Mafi is the 2 center at practice. So you're Drake May and you just had a terrible practice on Monday. You go out there on Tuesday and you have a center who is snapping it at your shoelaces almost every single snap. It's either towards his shoelaces or it's up above his head. Drake May 6'4", 6'5". So May has no earthly idea as to where the football is going to be snapped. So think about that. I mean, you talk about a young quarterback who doesn't want to get rattled, who's already thinking and is already being sped up. Imagine being that quarterback, and now you have a center who's snapping it at your toes, above your head. I mean, it's all over the joint. All over the joint. If you're Drake May, the only thing that you're like focused on is, can I catch the snap? Is the snap actually going to be anywhere near me? So you already have a young quarterback who is sped up, and now you have a center who's snapping it all over the place. That doesn't help. You know what also doesn't help? Receivers dropping the football. On Monday, Mitchell Wilcox could not catch the ball. Backup tight end couldn't catch the ball. May hit him in the hands 2 or 3 times. He just dropped it. Yesterday, Javon Baker has a golden opportunity to climb the ladder and make a contested catch to reel in a touchdown. Not a super easy play to make, but a play that Baker has made in prior practices. Hits him in the hands. Baker drops the football. Also, good defensive play. I will say that I think it was Marco Wilson defending him. But that's a play that your receiver could make. And the receiver doesn't make the play. So, yes, May individually, there's no doubt he hasn't been good. He has struggled with many things. And he looks like he's a little sped up and thinking a lot and trying to get his reins. But also, he's not being helped out. The offensive line in front of him, that second unit has not been good. Again, Mafi's been terrible. And he's out there with a bunch of guys he's throwing the football to for the most part. Some of this changed yesterday. They did put some of the top receivers in the rotation with May. But he's throwing a lot of footballs to Wilcox. And, I think he threw one to Baker at one point. The people that are surrounding him are not helping him much at all. When there's a play to be made and they can kind of lift him up, they're not really making the play. And when they can ease his mind with some settled offensive line play and a snap that's actually right at him, like right here. When, the offensive line is not helping him. So both things could be true. Drake May has struggled. Also, the pieces around him in that offensive line that he's working with the 2s and the 3s, they're not helping him at all. So I'm not freaking out. What I would love to see, Drake May work with the top offensive line for at least one series. I think the coaching staff should do that. I think tomorrow or Friday, he should get a full series of plays with the top offensive line and see if that impacts him for the better. Because what I think is happening here is you already have a rookie quarterback who's fighting it, right? He's fighting it early in camp. And then you have him with a bunch of dudes who just are not good enough to help him get over that hump. So I think it'd be a smart idea to throw him out there with the top offensive line for one series. Go to Brissett. Brissett knows he's a veteran. They signed Brissett because Brissett understands the situation. Brissett's not going to lose his mind. Go to Brissett and tell him, look, you know what's going on out here. The offensive line's been brutal in front of Drake. He can't get a snap in shotgun that's actually a controlled snap right to him. So we're going to run him out there with the top offensive line for one series. I'm sure Brissett would be fine with it. Give May a series with the top offensive line and your top weapons. Pop Douglas was out there yesterday, which was great to see. Red non-contact jersey, but he was out there running routes. He was doing the dang thing. So put May out there with the top offensive line along with Jalen Polk and Pop Douglas and Javon Baker and give him 5 or 6 snaps with those players and see if he can kind of take a breath. That would be my suggestion. Another suggestion, like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching the pod, you enjoy the content, help us out by doing those things. Also, rate and review at Spotify and Apple Pods. All right, I got to quickly run through this stuff because this was going to be a long podcast. Let's get to good stuff, right? I mean, Brissett was good, right? But let's get to the offensive line. My 2 eyes, my personal opinion, and I know some people think the offensive line took a step back yesterday. I think the backup offensive line took a step back yesterday. I am here to tell you that the top offensive line actually looks pretty good. Don't be shocked. Again, it's early. They can fall off a cliff. All I can tell you is that the padded practices so far, the first 2 padded practices, the top 5 up front in front of Brissett overall have looked pretty good. They look settled on a 5. Caden Wallace, left tackle. Sidney So, left guard. David Andrews, when he gets back, they've looked good without Andrews, which I think is another great point, right? No David Andrews the first 2 padded practices, but the offensive line has held it together. So Andrews will be back because his situation is not an injury situation from what I heard. So you've got left tackle, Caden Wallace, left guard, Sidney So. Andrews is your center. Owenu is your right guard, and your right tackle is Chuks Okorafor. They have had that offensive line now for, I think it's 4 straight practices, and I would anticipate them having the same offensive line tomorrow, which would make 5 straight practices with that O-line. And they are improving, folks. That offensive line is improving. They're getting better. Scott Peters looks like he has started to work with some of the young guys, and they have started to get better at certain things. Now, I'm not an offensive line guru. You can read Evan Lazar. You can read Greg Bedard. They tell me that these guys are getting better. Caden Wallace has gotten better with some of the, some of the intricacies of offensive line play. The offensive line is getting better. They're improving. Again, they can fall off a cliff. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But all I know and all I saw the first 2 padded practices was an offensive line that was not a disaster. It wasn't even bad. They played pretty well. They're settling on a top 5. Caden Wallace looks like he has potential. Caden Wallace looks like an NFL lineman through the first 2 practices. The first 2 padded practices, Caden Wallace looks like a legitimate offensive lineman. He looks like a legitimate NFL tackle. Now, Is he going to be great? I can't tell you that. Again, all of this is subject to change because we're 2 padded practices in. But if you ask me right now, Nick, what do you think of Caden Wallace? I would tell you he looks pretty good. He looks better than I think a lot of people expected him to look. And the fact that they swung him to the left tackle, and he's been playing left tackle for 4 straight practices, and he has gotten better throughout those practices, I think is a good early sign. So Wallace looks like he's got some legitimate potential at tackle. That should be great news. At this juncture in camp, that is great news for the Patriots, and it's great news for all of you. So if you asked me, I would tell you Wallace looks like he's got potential. It looks like these guys are getting coached. They're getting on the same page. And you can see, one thing that I noticed yesterday, I had the good old binoculars on. One thing that I noticed yesterday, Scott Peters is like constantly coaching these guys. Like, I mean, he almost after almost every snap, he's talking to some guys. When they go through drills, he's constantly out there working with these guys. He's talking to them an awful lot. And if you watch this line and you watch Peters kind of interact with them, I think you'll walk away saying they might have a good coach in Scott Peters. They might have a good offensive line coach because the improvements from Wallace, I see, where are my entertainers? I just see this. Usually I got to grab a super chat, but what about Layden? I thought Layden Robinson had a very strong Monday. He had a very strong first padded practice on Monday. Yesterday, he took a slight step back, but again, he's a rookie, so you expect some up and down. He was really good on Monday, stood out on Monday, not as good yesterday, but, we'll see how he continues to, develop and grow. Mike Onwenu. Well, let me tell you about Mike Onwenu. I know there was some talk Greg Bedard wrote about, maybe he wasn't in the best of shape. Maybe there's a situation where he doesn't love football. Onwenu has been an absolute monster the first 2 padded practices. Monster. In the one-on-one pass rush drills, he got beat once, which was good news for the Patriots because you know who beat him? It's Keon White. Onwenu I think he's taken 8 or 9 one-on-one drills through the first 2 padded practices. He got beat once. And when I say when he's winning these reps, he is dominating these reps. Now, of course, you don't have Judon, you don't have Barmore, but he is dominating. I mean, he's just pushing guys around like they're little kids. Onwenu has looked tremendous the first 2 padded practices. So I think that's great news that you can share with people. Again, it's early, but Onwenu has been a stud. Also, these outside zone runs, we talk about the outside zone runs with AVP in this new offense. They've shown some promise. On Monday, there were at least 3 or 4 runs that popped for big gains. One of them might have been a long touchdown, 60-yard touchdown or so. It was tougher yesterday. More runs were stuffed by the defense yesterday, much more. But still, you do see some holes. You see some opportunities in the run game. So offensive line, overall, I give a thumbs up. When we talk about the top offensive line, I'm not talking to you, I'm not talking about these backups. And again, Mafi was a train wreck. There's been some misses, the second and third offensive line. I don't think many of you care about the second and third offensive line, right? I think all of us are looking at who's the top 5 and are they going to be okay? And what I'm telling you is for the first 2 padded practices, their top 5 on the offensive line, they've looked okay. And if they continue to progress, I think we could say that they might be all right up front as long as they stay healthy. Pass rush. It's a problem, I think. Obviously, Matthew Judon not being out there is an issue. Christian Barmore not being out there is an issue. Are you getting Joshua Uche of 2022 or 2023? Honestly, so far, he looks more like the 2023 Uche than 2022. Keon White has had moments. He's looked good. So if you're excited about Keon White, I don't think he's done anything through the first 2 padded practices that would take away your excitement. He has looked good. He looks like he could be a guy that could play almost every down this year if the Patriots wanted him to play every down. So Keon White looks good. Another guy who has popped, I mentioned this on Monday's podcast, but O'Shane Ximenez, he has had some moments at these practices. So there are still issues. Judon, Barmore, how they're going to handle that. But there have also been a couple of guys in Ximenez and Keon White who have done, pretty well. To see, to see those guys working out helps at least a little bit. Safety. Jabril Peppers went out on Monday due to injury. Took like one snap, then left. What are they doing at safety without Peppers? You've seen some Jalen Hawkins out there. So they're playing Jalen Hawkins, but they're really mixing and matching on the back end. Jalen Hawkins got snaps. Jonathan Jones got some snaps at safety at yesterday's practice. Marcus Jones got some snaps at safety at yesterday's practice. Is that because Peppers is out, or are they going to do that anyway? I don't know. But what I can tell you is we've seen Hawkins, the Joneses, and Joshua Bledsoe has also gotten some snaps. Marte Mapu remains out. That's a problem. He's got to get his ass on the field soon. If he doesn't, it is what it is. How does one pronounce Ximenez? Just like that, Ellie. Ximenez. O'Shane Ximenez. I know that because he played at ODU when I was down in Virginia Beach. ODU's Norfolk. So he was the star at ODU. So O'Shane Ximenez. My guy Bedard has a big-time problem with that. So Mapu is still out. That's not good. They have a mix-and-match vibe right now at safety with Peppers being out. Wide receivers. Let's get to the wide receivers quickly. Jalen Polk. Nothing that I've seen from Jalen Polk would concern me. He is somebody who I think is going to be steady. I think he's going to contribute right away. He had a tremendous touchdown catch yesterday where he leaped up over the top of the defensive back. It might have been Marco Wilson, but he jumped up and he reached over and plucked it for the touchdown. I think, some of you could have seen that on Twitter. But Jalen Polk, I don't have much concern about him. I think he's going to be good for this football team. Javon Baker, boomer bust feel. He'll make a huge play, and then he'll kind of go quiet. He might be the guy that could go, a couple of weeks catching like 3 or 4 passes, and you go, what the hell happened with Javon Baker? And then all of a sudden he shows up one game and catches, 5 for 160 and 2 touchdowns. He has that kind of element to his game, a little bit boomer bust. So, the highs are very high, but sometimes, he drops a football every once in a while. But he's got that ceiling. He's got high ceiling, and he makes some of those wow plays. But he's not gonna. I don't know if he's gonna give you a wow play week in and week out. He might, but more boom or bust feel. He had a string of really good practices. Yesterday, he was not so great. Pop Douglas makes a huge difference. Captain Obvious just walked into the room to tell you that. But Pop Douglas, he was out there yesterday in the red jersey. His speed, his quickness. I mean, he makes a difference immediately for this passing game. And I don't think we should overlook the fact that he has not had a ton of snaps with this offense because that impacts the offense. We should also not overlook the fact that Kendrick Bourne has not been out there. Tyquan Thornton. He might be leading KJ Osborne and Jalen Reagor. It's early. We know Thornton's history, okay? But if you asked me who has been the better player from what I've seen out of those guys, I would say Thornton's been the better player so far. One-on-ones, Thornton's done a really good job. And he had a tremendous connection with Jacoby Brissett on Monday with an over-the-shoulder catch. So I think Tyquan has, kind of creeped out in front when we talk about the Jalen Reagors, KJ Osborne's, Juju Smith-Schusters. Out of those guys, I think Tyquan has kind of inched forward. Juju, he looks washed. He looks like the same Juju to me. He'll have a little bit of juice, like one route. He'll catch a football, but then the rest of the day, he's just kind of sluggish. I don't see it with him. I think physically that he is pretty beat down. My last note before I run, I'm going to make it at about an hour. Write this down. Get ready for 12 personnel. Get ready for 12. Get ready for 2 tight ends. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets with this football team offensively. I think you're going to see a decent amount of Henry with Hooper. So get ready for 12 personnel. Get ready for 2 tight end sets. Who earns that third spot? Nobody's really jumped out. Mitchell Wilcox has trouble catching the football, so I would say he's the back of the line. Jaheim Bell hasn't done too much. I haven't seen much from him. I think he could be a secret weapon with this offense, but I haven't seen much from him. Michael Petway, he made a nice one-handed catch at one point, which was nice. But I do think we should be ready for a decent amount of 2 tight end sets with this offense. I think we should be ready for some 12 personnel. Hint, hint. At least from what we've seen. That's what I would say. All right, I've gone an hour. I'm done. I need water. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Give us that Facebook, Twitter. Likes count as well. We appreciate those. Comment and subscribe. Trying to hit 3,500 subscribers to this podcast. Hopefully we get there by the football season. Subscribe if you haven't just yet. Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. I appreciate every single one of you who have spent time with me today. We'll be back on Friday with another show for you. Until then, be well. And thank you for all the super chats as well, especially Terry for that $50 bomb. We appreciate you. Until the next time, it's the Nick